Howdy, folks. I am Daniel Pierce, and yes, I know I have a plush sloth on my shoulder. Yes, his name is Gilbert, and yes, he is my new best friend. Now, I want to present to you all with something that I really love to talk about: freedom of expression. It's a sort of topic that I really enjoy talking about, especially when it talks about criticism of certain aspects of not even my own government, but also just other art and other forms of criticism that can be leveled against even those who want to revoke my right to freedom of expression. Because it's very interesting to get into this topic, because without freedom of expression, there wouldn't be any artistic integrity or an outlet to express one's opinions. You wouldn't be able to freely express how oddly worded this presentation is, or how objectively the new Artemis Fowl adaptation was. They have the right to express their creative vision, of course, but I have the right to express my opinion that their creative vision was utter insanity. To examine this insanity in firsthand, we must understand how it came to fruition, how this foundational element of democracy allowed many great ideas, including Artemis Fowl, to come into existence. How then on this freedom of expression led to an evolution of themes and styles, no matter how terrible. And finally, and this is important, why we have taken for granted freedom of expression. How we taken for granted and how spoiled we have become under this system, where we don't realize how important it is. Now let's rewind the clock about 1 hour. Wait, you want to rewind it a decade, Gilbert? Centuries. Tasty. Anyways, let's talk about our main point today. We're going to talk about the history of freedom of expression and its role in democracy. The historical implications, if you will. So, the ability to publicly speak out against the government has not been a new one. It's been around for centuries. Even since the days when we were in British colonialism, where we protested the British authority under the Boston Tea Party, to the present day where we're protesting police brutality at the current moment. Now, the importance to speak out against the government also extends to media coverage, where we can actually examine and be informed on government policies and affairs that are happening day to day, and the freedom to assemble and protest, as mentioned by the protests with Boston Tea Party and police brutality. This allows us to assemble without any repercussions from certain state officials, even if they see some violent outbreaks. That should not be commonplace. It should just be peaceful, and you're allowed to protest. There are failed attempts at limiting freedom of expression in history, though, such as McCarthyism in the 1950s under the Senator Joseph McCarthy, when he tried to review communist sympathizers and within the ranks of government, even though he wanted to extend his own personal power. But fortunately, he was censored by the Senate in his time, and he did not become a problem later on afterwards. They also have People's Park in Berkeley, where Nixon wanted to sort of have the authority to not have protests against the Vietnam draft, ability to draft people, including college students, especially if they were against it, and that he sent the National Guard to break it up, and it resulted in a riot. But fortunately now we are, even if you look back in 2001 with the Iraqi war, we were able to freely protest without much harm. We were allowed to peacefully do it. Now, media coverage specifically, we can talk about journalism, where there are struggles in reporting government policy and action, especially if you look in the past, from the Sedition Acts in 1914. You could also go back even to when libel and defamation have yet to even been sort of discussed in legal terms. But fortunately, in the present day, you have a lot of accessibility to government information, especially on public record, in terms of media coverage on foreign affairs and domestic and foreign affairs, of course. You also have newspapers. This is a very important subject too, because I know firsthand, because my mother used to be an editor-in-chief at the not editor-in-chief, my apologies, at the Journal and Courier. So I understand this firsthand, but the importance of sustaining this industry, especially because if you're an independent print media site, especially if you're one for print, you have the ability to express yourself and what's going on locally within your own neck of the woods. There's importance of journalism, like the 2001 Boston Diocese scandal that was broken by the Spotlight program underneath the Boston Globe. But there are consequences, though, of not supporting this industry, especially if you've seen online media, where they can have sponsored content where corporations can limit what you can report on their own industry practices. And if there is one thing media can cover in detail and receive attention for, it's creative content. Let's be honest, they report that a lot just to gain attention. And now the range of artistic expression is what we're going to next. And to start off with, we're going to start through the broad entertainment sphere, especially with music, where you talked about anti-war music with like Bruce Springsteen, or with Born USA, or War, What Is It Good For? Or 90s era's hip hop with the alternative nation with like Fight the Power against the establishment, against the government and its inadequacies. Towards the film industry and video games, such as violence in video games, where the ESRB was created after violent scares with Mortal Kombat, or film where you've seen Quentin Tarantino films that it brings up discussions and debates as to what can we not just allow in film, but it also talks about just these issues firsthand, what are discussed in these films, especially in documentaries where they talk about certain individuals, certain corporations, and how we should look back at it and then apply whatever information that we learned from it to now, what we can learn from it and get better from. There's a topic of cultural appropriation as well, if you discuss like the melting pot, where rock and roll, such as Elvis Presley taking influence from black musicians from Fats Domino, Little Richard, and Keith Richards from Chuck Berry. You can even look back on Chuck Berry's career and that he learned his influences from gospel like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, to also to the fashion industry, where we kind of hodgepodge together certain ideas and fashion senses from European cultures, Asian cultures, and many other cultures that are just very fashionable and just very beautiful to look at. And we live in a multicultural society, and that's a very great benefit if you're in a melting pot, because you can exchange customs as to, dang it, Gilbert, you can exchange in customs what you want to believe. Like, you can exchange like certain benefits of the cultures and make it together to make something even better. And you have more of a willingness to adapt to these certain new ideas and to new people around you. It's a new door that you've opened for yourself to get better in this life, to have a pursuit of happiness. And we also have to discuss the flip side of that freedom of expression has been taken for granted, especially when we go back to Berkeley, where in the past it used to be the battleground for freedom of expression during the People's Park riots, but now they have been enforcing speaking bans and certain keynote speakers such as Bill Maher. I've read this book, and it is quite colorful with its verbiage, and I do not recommend you reading it because it is very, very inappropriate, but it is a great book nonetheless, and if you are curious, I do recommend it for the managerial aspects of comedy. But specifically him and other sort of people like Ben Shapiro, who talk about the dangers of suppressing freedoms of speech and infringing upon those ideas. And it's the response to those ideas, such as like cancel culture, which basically suppresses people's ideas and kind of ruins their careers by suggesting that they themselves are immorally corrupt, especially their ideas. And if we do this, however, we in turn kind of isolate them to one specific corner, and then we just radicalize that certain idea because we just isolate themselves and they don't have an ability to freely express that. And to paraphrase Daryl Davis, who mentioned on this topic, when two enemies are talking, there is no fighting. You can understand your enemies and possibly plant a seed that may make them become better people, rather than continue the fighting. So keep that in mind whenever you see your adversary, talk to them and discuss it. You might come to an understanding. Freedom of expression, to reiterate, is, to an accepting society, the ability to convey one's art without repercussion from any government, and the ability to express your artistic creativity to the fullest extent without repercussions either from the government or other people. So there is a wealth of ideas in art that free expression can allow, and it gives the creative people the right and explore their creativity without any limits, as mentioned previously. And it's that if you suppress it, then you're stifling creativity. The only thing that should stifle creativity is where to start from and how to act on that creative impulse. And allow me to freely express here that even if you disagree with free expression, that's also protected by freedom of expression technically. So no matter what, you're still expressing yourself, even if it's to revoke the right, which is ironically hilarious and meanwhile quite terrifying. And yeah, that's about what I have to say. And Gilbert also has to say thank you for listening to my presentation. I really appreciate you all listening to my dull presentation. And whilst I have wasted 10 minutes of your life, I saved you 95 minutes by telling you not to watch Artemis Fowl. Have a good one, and tally ho, you absolute geniuses. Have a good one.